My name is Jessie Fallon. I'm a member of Group 4, and our author study was on Virginia Hamilton. Virginia Hamilton is a prominent African-American female author. She was born in Ohio in 1934. She has written many children's and young adult books, and she's won many awards such as the Newbery Award, National Book Award, and the Hans Christian Andersen Award in 1992. Our rationale for choosing this author was that she has an ability to weave stories using traditional African American themes, and our grade level was 3rd grade. The book that I chose for my author study was The People Could Fly. This is an African American traditional folktale, and it's a story that has been passed down from many African American families. This text is about slaves in Africa long ago who flew away in order to escape. It explains how people back then were captured for slavery and that they had wings, but these wings were shed in order to travel across the ocean in their ships. One day an old man named Toby came along to the fields and would find those slaves who were so tortured and desperate that they would no longer continue, and he would whisper magic words in their ears, allowing them to grow back their wings and fly away. One slave in particular, named Sarah, had a baby tied to her back. The white master would whip both Sarah and the baby, and when she could no longer go on from the heat, exhaustion, and the pain of her slavery, Toby gave her the ability to fly. This text continues, and it includes that Toby has saved many people, but unfortunately could not save everyone. The slaves that were left over passed on the story of this magic wings to their children and grandchildren. The objectives for my lesson are: students will be able to analyze the author's writing style and discuss how it helps readers to understand the text, and also students will be able to discuss how the historical time period influences the text. Before reading, I will begin the lesson by looking at the cover and making any predictions about what the text could be about. I will ask the students, what do you think the story, The People Could Fly, might be about? I'll remind students about their previous knowledge of magic and folktales to help them with their predictions. Students will turn and talk with partners to discuss their possible ideas, and we will share these with the whole group before we begin our story. While reading the story aloud to the class, I will stop and ask guiding questions such as, what do you think the illustrations of these people flying away show you about their lives? At the beginning of the story, there are a lot of illustrations of very happy people with these beautiful white wings flying away, and I believe that students will look at these illustrations and discuss how these people looked very happy and very free. Later in the book, we see pictures of slaves who are in shackles. I will ask students, now we see how they are living much different lives. What happened? And students will be describing how they were captured, they were brought into slavery, and how they look to be feeling now. Then I will ask them how did they feel seeing these illustrations and about hearing about the pain of Sarah and her baby. And I would assume that students would respond with feelings of sadness or fear about what is happening in the book. Also, while we're reading the story, I will have students participate in a partner talk, and they will discuss how Virginia Hamilton's style of writing in the story is different from other authors we've read, and why they think she does this. In this particular story, Virginia Hamilton uses a very conversational tone that we see often in oral traditional stories. She often drops the letter G from the end of words, so instead of it being running, it becomes running, and instead of it being crying, it becomes crying, and she uses phrases such as, don't you know? I think by her doing this, it creates a conversational tone, and it seems as if she's reading the story to you aloud. And I hope that students will take away from this style of writing, that it's as if she's writing this as if she is a storyteller telling this story to her audience as opposed to just writing it on paper. After we finish reading the book, we will discuss the historical time period of the text and as well as how it influences the story. Now, the students that I would be working with for this lesson would have a previous background knowledge of both the Civil Rights Movement and the African American history. Students will be completing a historical analysis chart, which you can see on this slide. This chart says that the historical context of a time often greatly influences what an author writes about and how it is written. A reader is better able to understand a piece of writing by analyzing the historical period. The upper left box is the historical time period where students will write about the time period of which the book is written. Next to that, in the upper right box, is how that historical time period influences the text. The lower left box is the author's background, and the lower right box next to it is how the author's background might influence the text. Together with the teacher, students would fill out the historical time period box. We would write about how this particular text was written about a time of slavery, maybe around the 1600s. It was written during a time when people were not treated as equals, and during a time when African Americans were treated as property. I will discuss with the students how this time period differs from modern times today. Also with the teacher, students would fill out the author's background, and I would guide them in filling out this part together. We would write about how Virginia Hamilton was one of the first female African American authors to win literary awards, that she was born in Ohio in 1936, and that because of this she lived during a time of inequality between white and African Americans. She also experienced the civil rights movement. Students would then work with their partners, and they would fill out the other two boxes of our chart. They will discuss with their partners how the history of this time influences the text, so how the slavery and how African Americans were treated, how that would influence the writing, as well as how Virginia Hamilton's background would influence her writing. So they would look in to see that not only was the history about slaves and about African Americans not being treated equally, but that Virginia Hamilton, being an African American female, lived during a time of inequality, and how that may have shaped her as a writer and how that may have influenced the books that she has written. At the completion of this lesson, I will assess students first on teacher observation. Basically, I will see how students are learning, how they're working together. I will listen in on their discussions, as well as their oral answers to my questions, and just kind of get a grasp on what they know and what they've learned from this lesson. I will also formally assess them on their historical analysis chart, specifically those two boxes of filling out how the history influences the text and how the author's background influences the text. I hope that students will take away from this how history can shape a text and how the author and their experiences in life can shape them as writers and shape their stories. And I also hope students would learn a history lesson from this lesson about slavery and about African American history.